Hi everybody, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whatever it is that you're watching this. Welcome to your baking science intro. The point of this little talk we're going to have is so that you understand the different categories of baking ingredients and what their functions are. Baking has quite a bit of science to it, and different ingredients interact in different ways. So my hope is that if we go through this a little bit more and you can understand what the function of one thing or the other is in your recipe, then you can have more success and you can tweak recipes according to what your likings are when you're making things. So almost all baked goods break down into kind of 4 separate categories of ingredients. So your first category is stabilizers. So stabilizers are the thing in a recipe, in a cake, in a cookie, in a muffin, in a pie crust, that give your product structure. That's kind of like the foundation of your product. So included in those are flours. Here I have some whole wheat flour, some bread flour, some cake flour. There is a sheet about flours in with your paperwork that kind of goes through all the different kinds and what their uses are and what the differences and similarities are, so you can refer to that. Flours are a stabilizer in that the protein, the gluten that's in flours, forms the structure for your baked good. And it kind of serves 2 functions. It kind of makes that framework, so you can think of it kind of like your building blocks. And then it also serves to absorb moisture, and when flour absorbs moisture, the starches in it will kind of swell up and not gelatinize, but kind of form that base. So that's how that works. Eggs are a baking powerhouse, and you're going to see in our lessons moving forward that they serve a million functions. But as a stabilizer, what they do is they help incorporate and distribute air into your products, which you'll learn about later in our methods is kind of a big deal. And also the proteins in egg react to heat to coagulate. So you think of when you crack an egg in a pan, how it's that liquidy kind of thing, and then when exposed to heat, it kind of gels up and forms a solid. So you think of eggs that you mix into a batter kind of function the same way. Another stabilizer would be cornstarch, or arrowroot is another one. These are starches that are kind of starches derived from plants, and same thing as kind of the starch in flour. They absorb moisture and expand and kind of help build that structure. Another one is gelatin. Gelatin, I don't know if you'll recall from when we talked about sauces and stocks and things like that. Gelatin is a product that is derived from animal bones, rendered bones. And same thing, it absorbs moisture, and that moisture creates like a gel structure, so that can be something that adds that. Another one, which I don't have an example, I do have an example, is pectin. Pectin is naturally found in things like fruits. Apples have a lot of pectin in them. You may have heard of pectin as far as making jams or jellies. It's a thickener. Same type of thing. It absorbs moisture and creates a gel. So all of these things work as a stabilizer. These are all kind of the foundations of what you're making. So moving from there, you work into what are called your liquefiers. And the purpose of a liquefier in your recipe is to kind of add that moisture that gets soaked up and worked with these things, and add tenderness to a product. So you think of like a moist cake or a tender muffin or a biscuit that has a really nice soft inside to it. That comes from your liquefiers. So one of your main liquefiers is sugar, whether it be, this is white sugar, baker's sugar, this is brown sugar. Sugars are interesting because you don't think of them as a liquid. When you first add a sugar, say you're whipping eggs together, or eggs and milk together, and you add sugar, the first thing it does is kind of thicken that mixture. But you have to remember that when you expose sugar to heat, it melts into a liquid quickly. So it is actually a liquefier in a baking recipe. Another thing that sugar does that's important in baking is that caramelization. If you think of melting sugar into caramel, or burning sugar on top of creme brulee, you get that caramelization, and that's what helps you kind of get those that brown look to your baked goods. Another one, water, obviously is a liquid and a liquefier. Same thing, it kind of loosens up the structure, provides that moisture, and when heated will create steam, which we'll learn when we talk about our leavenings. Oh, and it also helps to dilute water-soluble ingredients, like sugars. Another category is milk, buttermilk, cream, sour cream, yogurt, any kind of like dairy product that you use like that, those are also liquefiers. The proteins and the sugars and the fats in dairy and liquid milk products, they kind of loosen up the mixture. They serve kind of like the same function as water would serve in that respect. But then they also help with color, they help with browning, they help with flavor. And additionally, there is an acid, lactic acid. I don't know if you've heard of that before, you probably have in different settings, but the lactic acid that is in milk or dairy products helps with leavening, and it also helps tighten proteins up so you get a real tender crust. Fats and oils, so we're talking about butter, oil, olive oil, things like that you see in baking recipes. Those kind of function as liquefiers in two ways. The first way is in a small quantity, you know, like if you're thinking of, if you've made a pizza dough before, or more like a bread dough type of dough, and they'll say, you know, put 3 tablespoons of olive oil or something like that. What a fat does in that instance is to kind of help stretch out those gluten proteins in your flour and helps make them more elastic, so that when the item is baked, it can kind of help that item expand without breaking down. So you get your leavened pizza doughs, breads, flatbreads, that kind of thing. And the second way is if the mixture, if it has a greater percentage, like say you're making a pumpkin bread or something like that, which you'll get some recipes for in a little bit. And it says something like a cup of oil. What that does is kind of stretch that protein out enough so that it breaks, and then that helps it get like a much more tender, moist crumb and a really nice structure to your items. Also, like sugar, you probably don't think of butter as being a liquid, but again, you know, if you sit butter on a hot counter, if you put butter in a hot pan, it melts instantly. So it's kind of like a solid that works as a liquid. The third category is leaveners. So leaveners are the things that give you that rise. So you've got your structure from your flour, you've gotten more building blocks with your liquefiers that are gonna kind of like help work that into a structure. And then the leaveners are what give all your baked things that rise, you know, what turns your cupcake from this much dough to a fluffy cupcake like this, you know, that's where you get your rise. So there are two kinds of leaveners. One is organic. So we're thinking of things like yeast. Yeast is a living organism. Yeast is alive. In most recipes with yeast, you have to kind of like bloom it in usually a warm water with a little bit of sugar added to it. Yeast kind of consumes sugar, eats sugar, feeds off of sugar, and from that creates carbon dioxide and a little bit of alcohol. Not alcohol, but enough, you know, a teeny bit. It comes in, like this is an active dry yeast. You'll see things called rapid rise yeast. You can find sometimes cake yeast, which is like a more cakey soft product. It is a living thing, and it creates carbon dioxide from that feeding off the sugar. Yeast cannot survive under 65 degrees or over 110 degrees. So if you're blooming your yeast in a super hot water, you're gonna kill it and you're not gonna get that. And if the reverse, if you're using, you know, 50-degree water, nothing's gonna happen, it's not gonna be activated. So you're looking for that warm, lukewarm, you put your finger in it, it feels warm, under 110 degrees. Another organic leavener is steam. So this steam that's coming from these liquefiers, you know, when you have a solid that turns to liquid, there is a vapor coming off of it, there is a steam, there is a gas coming off of it. So steam is another form of organic leavening. Okay, then you have your chemical leaveners. Baking soda and baking powder. You've probably heard of these a million times. They're used in many, many recipes, either on their own or together. basically the way they function is that they're an alkaline that reacts to an acid in some of your other ingredients to cause that carbon dioxide release, that reaction. Baking powder is actually the alkaline that has an acid built in. It's combined with an acid, so it kind of is a 2-in-1. So in some recipes where, say you don't have a milk or you don't have, you know, a dairy ingredient or something, maybe you could use just a baking powder for that. A baking soda is just the straight alkaline. So the other thing is, like this brand that I use is called a double acting baking powder. So that means that there is a reaction when you mix it with a liquid, and then there's another reaction when you expose it to heat. So it's kind of like a double duty type of deal. The last category is flavorings, which is your extracts, your spices, your seasonings, your chocolate, your nuts, your fruits, all those things that you're adding that kind of give the flavor profile that you want to these things. So, you know, your cinnamon, your vanilla, all those kinds of things. So those are kind of like the frosting on the cake. So you have your base, you have the thing that's building your structure, your stabilizers, your flour, your starches, your pectin, your gelatin, all those things. And that's what's kind of giving you the building blocks. And then you have these liquefiers that in different combinations kind of work to like tenderize all these things, work with the proteins and the starches in the flour, and kind of set up what's to come. And then you have your leaveners. We will go through in our next lessons different baking methods, different combinations of these ingredients and how you use them, different ways of producing different results and products so you can get a better understanding of how these work together. So hopefully this kind of gives you a decent intro into what all these things are all about. And I'm looking forward to kind of testing them out in our next lessons and seeing what we get out of it. So enjoy your day, evening, night, morning, whatever it is, and we will talk soon.